April 15, 1944. Willow Run, Michigan. The night sky over southeastern Michigan pulsed with light. White arcs from welding torches, orange flares from blast furnaces, and the steady glow of floodlights that erased the stars. From the air, the asterisk Willow Run plant looked like a city forged entirely of metal. 4 miles of assembly line coiled through the prairie like a river of steel, and at the end of that river, every 63 minutes, a asterisk B-24 Liberator bomber rolled out ready for war. On the ground, the air was thick with heat and noise. The smell of hot aluminum mingled with oil and sweat. Workers, men and women both, hurried along the vast concrete floors in uniforms of denim and leather. Some pushed carts stacked with rivets. Others maneuvered cranes that dangled bomber wings like enormous silver leaves. It was nearly midnight, yet the plant was alive as if it were noon. Willow Run never slept. A foreman in a grease-stained jacket barked orders over the roar of engines. "Keep it moving, people. 47 minutes till the next rollout." His voice echoed off the rafters, lost in the metallic rhythm of thousands of machines. Near the final assembly line, Helen stoddered asterisk. A 23-year-old riveter from Toledo wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her glove. Her drill buzzed against a wing joint as sparks danced around her boots. She could feel the floor trembling beneath her, hundreds of B-24 parts inching forward in synchronized motion. She had joined the plant only a year earlier, one of the many Rosie, the riveter's asterisk, who had traded aprons for overalls when their brothers went to war. "Hey, Helen," shouted her partner, Charlie Dyer asterisk, a machinist barely out of high school. "That last one just took off from the test field. She's in the air." Helen smiled faintly. "Then let's make the next one fly faster." Above them, the ceiling cranes glided silently along steel beams, lowering massive fuselage sections into place. Each section was aligned by chalk marks on the floor, an idea borrowed from Ford's automobile plants. At first, it had seemed impossible. How could something the size of a bomber be built like a car? But now, as the pieces came together under humming lights, the impossible was routine. In an office overlooking the factory floor, Charles Sorensen Ford's production genius, nicknamed Cast Iron Charlie, watched the organized chaos below with pride. His face, lit by the glow of machinery, was etched with fatigue. He hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in months. When reporters once asked him how Ford planned to build bombers on an assembly line, he had replied simply, "The same way we build cars, one step at a time without stopping." Below his window, the main conveyor crept forward. Each stage had its own crew: frame builders, engine installers, electricians, gunners. The rhythm was relentless. At 0:00, a skeletal fuselage entered the line. At 63:00, it emerged as a fully operational bomber, four Pratt& Whitney engines gleaming under fluorescent light, serial numbers freshly painted, propellers ready to turn. Even the timing was industrial poetry. One bomber every 63 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Outside, snow from the Michigan spring melted on the tarmac where the newest Liberator waited for inspection. Its skin reflected the floodlights like a mirror. Test pilot *LT James Hall climbed the ladder to the cockpit, clipboard in hand. He had flown more than 40 test runs in a month. Each new bomber left the ground for a 20-minute flight before delivery to the Army Air Forces. He slid into the seat, ran his fingers across the controls, and smiled. "Feels like they built her faster than I can test her," he joked to his co-pilot. Inside the hangar, Helen and her team gathered around the next frame coming down the line. They didn't know where their bombers would fly: Italy, the Pacific, Germany. But they took quiet pride in knowing they were part of something vast. On the radio mounted near the time clock, Glenn Miller's "In the Mood" played faintly under the clang of tools. At 11:58 p.m., a siren sounded across the plant floor. "Roll out in 5 minutes," cameras flashed. Supervisors and inspectors hurried to the end of the line as the finished B-24, christened Spirit of Detroit Asterisk, emerged from the final bay doors. The workers stopped for a moment, faces shining with sweat and metal dust, and watched as the bomber rolled forward into the night air. Floodlights illuminated its nose art, a winged gear with the words asterisk, built by Ford Willow Run, stenciled beneath it. A band of night shift workers began clapping softly, then louder, until the sound filled the hangar. The applause wasn't celebration, it was rhythm, part of the endless beat that kept the factory alive. Helen looked up at the ceiling where the cranes still moved, already lowering the next frame into place. She smiled wearily. "Guess that means break's over," she muttered. And somewhere overhead, as Spirit of Detroit lifted off for its test flight, the line beneath her floor began moving again, steel against steel, conveyor belts grinding, torches flaring. Another bomber beginning its 63-minute journey from bolts to sky. The factory didn't pause, didn't breathe, didn't dream. It simply built asterisk asterisk because that was what America did best. At Willow Run, industry had become heartbeat, and the heartbeat never stopped. Morning sunlight bled through high factory windows streaked with soot. The air inside shimmered with heat, even though the sun had barely risen. Overnight, the line had turned out 7 complete bombers, each already rolling toward the test field at the edge of the complex. But there was no celebration, just a quiet change of rhythm as the asterisk asterisk night crew asterisk filed out, faces gray with fatigue, and the asterisk asterisk day shift asterisk streamed in like another tide. The Willow Run factory never truly changed pace. It only changed hands. On the concrete floor, supervisors in khaki shirts clipped new work orders to the rolling chassis. A red warning lamp flashed above the conveyor's head. Line speed 1.6 feet per minute. It was more than a number. It was a heartbeat, unbroken, measured, mechanical. Helen stoddered, her hair tied in a scarf beneath her helmet, returned to her post beside a fuselage section suspended from a crane. The metal surface was cold to the touch, still damp from the dew brought in by an open loading door. She set her rivet gun against the frame, pressed the trigger, and the sound cracked through the hall. Asterisk asterisk, thack thack thack, asterisk asterisk, echoing off the steel beams above. Around her, hundreds of others worked in the same tempo, forming a kind of industrial symphony. 63 minutes, said Charlie Dyer beside her. "You think it's real? I heard they're timing it to the second now." Helen grinned faintly. "If it is, we better not miss a beat." Down the line, a foreman lifted his stopwatch and checked his clipboard. Each station had a precise window, no more than 9 minutes per stage. In those 9 minutes, teams had to fit engine mounts, control cables, hydraulic lines, and gun ports. The B-24's guts grew into shape as though the machine were alive, bones and veins coming together with human hands as its pulse quickened toward flight. Overhead speakers blared instructions in clipped tones. Line 3, adjust timing on wing section delta. Crew 4, hydraulic test in progress. Crew 5, prepare for transfer to stage 11. The voices merged with the pounding of presses and the steady shuffle of boots. The plant didn't sound like chaos anymore. It sounded like a giant breathing organism, inhaling raw metal and exhaling bombers. At 9:22 a.m., a asterisk asterisk brass bell asterisk asterisk rang from the mezzanine. A new bomber was ready for rollout. The entire North Bay came to a brief halt as the massive hangar doors rumbled open, letting in the glare of daylight. The aircraft, a asterisk asterisk B-24J model asterisk asterisk, its aluminum skin gleaming like a mirror, moved slowly toward the runway. Ground crews guided it out with glowing batons. Cameras flashed, workers cheered softly, then returned to their stations without missing a beat. The line shuddered, jerked forward, and the next frame took its place. From the catwalk above, Charles Sorensen observed the scene through smoke and light. The old Ford executive carried a worn notebook, its pages full of equations, timings, and sketches. His hands trembled slightly as he wrote. Current rate, 56 minutes, 14 seconds. Aim, 60 continuous by July. He had been at Willow Run since its first day, fighting skeptics who said that aircraft couldn't be mass-produced like automobiles. Even Henry Ford himself had doubted it, until the first dozen Liberators flew. Now, the impossible had become procedure. He turned to the Army Air Forces liaison standing beside him. "Do you realize," Sorensen said quietly, "that this line builds more air power in a day than Hitler's Luftwaffe can replace in a week?" The officer smiled grimly. "That's why we call this place the arsenal of democracy." Below them, the roar of compressors and grinders filled the air. Sparks rained down from welding stations, lighting up the faces of workers who had stopped seeing them as fire. They were part of the weather now. Outside the main bay, the test runway shimmered under spring sunlight. LT. James Hall, the test pilot, climbed into the cockpit of the newly finished bomber. He ran his gloved hands over the instruments, fresh from the factory, untested, perfect. The propellers began to spin, chopping the air into a blur. Mechanics waved from the ground, their overalls flapping in the prop wash. The bomber inched forward, then lifted from the concrete, shadow sweeping across the sea of factory roofs. Back inside, Helen watched through a small window near her station as the aircraft rose above the horizon. For a moment, she stopped working and let her hand rest against the cold steel of the next frame. Somewhere out there, that plane would join thousands more, flying across oceans she'd never see. Charlie nudged her. "Don't stop now. 63 minutes, remember." Helen smiled and squeezed the trigger again. The sound of her rivet gun blended seamlessly with the factory's heartbeat. As the day stretched on, the clock lost its meaning. The only time that mattered was the rhythm of the line. Lunches were eaten standing. Conversations were shouted over the noise of pneumatic drills. Sweat rolled down foreheads and evaporated in the furnace heat. But no one slowed down, not for a second. By sunset, another 20 bombers had left the line. By midnight, another 10. The numbers didn't even feel human anymore. They were mechanical, mathematical, relentless. Above the plant, a red warning light blinked on the roof, marking Willow Run for incoming cargo planes. From far away, pilots could see it glowing like a beacon, the pulse of American industry visible for miles in every direction. And still the factory worked. The lights burned, the belts turned, the hammers sang. Willow Run, the factory that never slept, kept building wings in the darkness because the sky itself depended on its heartbeat. The rain came down in fine needles, hissing against the glowing roofs of the plant. Inside, the sound of rain was drowned out by the deeper roar, the permanent thunder of assembly. Every minute, every hour, every shift bled into the next. No sirens announced the day, no whistle marked the night. The clock of Willow Run was the moving line itself. On the tarmac, a fresh B-24 rolled from the hangar. Its skin was beaded with moisture, the Ford logo faint beneath the chalked serial numbers. Reporters with flashbulbs crouched beside mechanics, trying to capture the ritual that had become routine. One more bomber, another 63-minute miracle. The shutter clicks froze, young faces streaked with oil, the reflections of their machines caught forever in grainy silver. In the cafeteria, Helen and dozens of riveters sat shoulder to shoulder at long steel tables. Tin lunch pails opened to the smell of coffee, bread, and cold potatoes. Someone turned up the radio, a newscaster reading Allied bombing tallies. Production in America continues at record pace. The voice droned through static. No one cheered. They simply nodded, eating quickly before the next shift. Outside the windows, light from the furnaces made the rainfall glitter like molten sparks. Across the complex, Charles Sorensen walked the catwalk above the main hall, coat collar turned up against the damp. He stopped to watch an inspector stamp the tail of a bomber. The motion was so practiced it looked ceremonial. Lift, strike, lift again. Each metallic thud echoed up to the roof trusses like a heartbeat. He thought of the old River Rouge line 2 decades earlier, when Ford had first built cars this way. Back then it was invention. Now it was instinct. At 02:17 a.m., the floodlights along the runway flickered as another aircraft lifted off into the mist. Engines roared low over the plant, rattling the loose panes in the roof. Workers paused only long enough to look up, then returned to their drills. Every sound blended, the hiss of rain, the hammering of rivets, the steady crawl of conveyors, until the distinction between weather and work disappeared. Far down the final line, Helen wiped grease from her hands and stared at the next unfinished fuselage sliding toward her. The nose was still hollow, ribs exposed, cables dangling like veins. She rested her palm on the cold metal. In an hour, it would be sealed, wired, tested, and rolled into daylight. Somewhere over Europe, someone would rely on what her hands had done tonight. At the edge of the airfield, Captain Hall watched from the cockpit of a finished Liberator as it idled for takeoff. Through his rain-spotted windshield, he could see the glow of the plant, an artificial sunrise stretching across miles. He knew that while he flew this bomber for its test loop, the next one would already be rolling into position behind him. The thought filled him with a strange comfort. When dawn broke, the storm cleared, revealing steam rising from the wet roofs and the long black rails of the supply yard glistening in the new light. The factory's hum did not change. Shift whistles blew, trucks reversed, cranes creaked back into motion. Somewhere deep inside, a bell marked another completed hour, another completed aircraft. Sorensen watched the sunrise through the factory windows, smoke drifting past like ghosts. He turned to the army liaison and said, half to himself, "They'll never believe we did it this way." The officer smiled. "They don't have to believe it," he said. "They'll see it in the sky." The two men stood in silence as the next bomber rolled out into the morning air, its propellers turning slow and sure. The workers cheered once, briefly, then bent back to their stations. The line crept forward again, eternal. The arsenal of democracy kept its promise. Steel transformed into flight minute by minute. And as the plant settled into its steady rhythm once more, the sound of victory was not a trumpet or a cheer, but the unending asterisk hum asterisk of machines building freedom by the clock.